Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast is number 1393. The topic is training and the title is Subtle Technique Improvements for Squat, Bench, and Deadlift. Pretty fun ones here. So what I wanted to do today was I had two clients I recently sent some feedback to about their technique. So I do, for my online clients, I do video reviews of their technique. And sometimes, they can get the videos, a training partner will hold the camera. Other times they'll have a tripod. Sometimes they just lean it up against the floor, and it points in their general direction. Don't really need to have the most amazing view. You just have to be able to see the person move, and that helps a lot. So I give feedback to their technique. They then, write back any questions they have. We make videos, exchange videos on YouTube sometimes. I do a lot of private videos so that way it's unlisted and it's kind of just unique for that person, which I love. That's a very fun kind of service. But I wanted to go through a couple of the feedback aspects I've given to two recent clients. Part of it is because it's fun every now and then to kind of get into the more nitty-gritty, smaller details of things. I know I tend to gear the podcast more towards kind of like beginners and kind of intermediates, so it's nice to touch on some more advanced stuff every now and then. So I want to go through that. So the first one we have is a teenager. He's getting ready for a competition. He was coached by his dad, and dad coached him excellent, great coaching. So you'll hear he is one of the comments I made the first time I saw his squat video in training was, "This is by far the best technique I've seen of any teenager I've worked with ever." So congratulations to you and your dad. And that's true. So he's getting ready for a competition, and I believe he's 16, strong as heck already. He's going to do great. He has very good, efficient movement, and he's already kind of got some good size to him. So he's going to do really well. Super excited for him. If he's happy with the service, I'm looking forward to training him for quite a while. So I looked through the squat videos he sent from this first week of training, and I wanted to read through some of the feedback I gave him and then talk about one of the specific aspects that I think can help him that is kind of like one of those more subtle technique aspects. So I watched his first video and I responded, smoked it. So very good snap of the bar at the top of the rep, and that means he drove through the entire top of the squat. He didn't coast. So I said that shows great intensity and carry throughout the rep, meaning you don't coast and get lazy towards the top of the rep. This is excellent, and that'll help you be able to grind through very heavy lifts because you'll have that driving force started from the bottom and you won't lose momentum. So sometimes people kind of they pop out of the bottom, they push enough to get through their sticking point, and then they kind of coast to the top. And what I like about him is he's driving through very purposeful all the way to full leg extension. Because when you get to very heavy weights and near max weights, you're going to bounce out of the bottom with the stretch reflex of the muscles. You're going to hit into your grind, grinding spot, kind of like your rough spot. I just blanked on a term. I just said it a couple sentences ago. But there's a term in the middle of your lifts where it kind of feels like everything stalls, and that's the sticking point. That's the phrase I was looking for. So the sticking point of the lift. Sometimes people will get stretch reflex really big out of big weights, and they'll pop up a little higher than they expected. And if they're not already driving along with the stretch reflex, they'll get caught kind of at the midpoint or the top end of their sticking point. And then they can't fight their way out of it because they haven't kind of come into that sticking point with momentum, with generating force. So it's almost like they bounce out of the bottom, they hit their sticking point, and then they start to push. And it's like, well, that's too damn late. That ain't going to work. You're going to get folded over and shoved right back down. So with him, it was really cool to see he understood that along with the stretch reflex bounce, he needed to also be driving extremely hard through muscular contraction to just basically obliterate that sticking point. So very happy to see that for him. His upper back bracing in the lower traps was excellent. So very tight, shoulder, his scapula where we're pressed, pulled together and down exceptionally well. he kept it through the unrack, which most people kind of like shrug up into the bar when they unrack and they lose all back tightness in kind of that lower trap area. They'll have their upper traps flex like crazy, and they'll say they're squeezing their back, but they're squeezing their back up, not squeezing their back down, which is absolutely what you need. So he did a great job of that, had his lower traps locked in the whole time. The walkout was super efficient, no wasted steps. His foot width looked good, his foot angle looked good, and it made it looked good that he was keeping full contact with his whole foot. So his big toe to his pinky toe to his heel, none of that ever left the ground. None of it shifted the whole way through the squat. He did a great job of sitting, kind of like staying pressured into his heels, while he was also creating torque by rooting the feet. If you don't know what that means, just type in YouTube rooting the foot for squatting, and you'll see videos of that. But it engages your hip-based musculature to create torque around the hip socket, which makes you much stronger, and it alleviates a lot of lower back stress as well. So he did all of that super well. Breathing was great. I could actually hear him breathe on the video, which is awesome, because that means he's taking a big breath before he squats. You could see him fill into his belt like a 360-degree fill, so he wasn't just trying to push his stomach forward, he was trying to expand his whole midsection out into his belt in all directions. Awesome, amazing. And then on the way down, he didn't let the bar push him forward, so he maintained kind of pressure back into the bar to maintain that heel pressure the whole way through the squat. Freaking awesome. I mean, this was like textbook how you should squat. So I told him, by far the best technique I've seen of any teenager I've ever worked with. Congratulations to him and his dad. I was super duper duper happy for him. Yes. Now, of course, there is always stuff that we would look for as, how can I get better? Well, if we look at strength production, you have kind of mental strength, you have technical strength, and you have physical strength. So mental strength is, do you get scared of big weights and all of a sudden you forget all your cues? Do you get scared of big weights and you rush through everything? So there's that part of it. He looked fine there. Didn't look like anything was scaring him. That's the benefit of being a teenager. So then we look at, physical development. Sure, the more he squats, the more work we put in, the more volume, blah, 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 blah. All that will go up, and he will get physical development. Now, technical development is awesome because technique development allows you to fully show the physical and mental strength that you have. So they all three kind of work together. You need all three of them to go well. But you can be physically strong, but if your technique is crap, you're not going to be able to express your physical strength. So you'll wonder why you can't lift as much, even though you feel like you should be able to lift more. And that's due to technical issues. So for him, the longer we work together, I'll be able to address the physical part. So that just takes time. Mental part doesn't look like he's having any issues there. Eventually, he might get to a weight that kind of scares him. He might have some, something that comes up, confidence issues. I've gone to big national level competitions with clients before, and they'll get very worried because of the expense of the whole event. And it's like, geez, I hope I don't waste everybody's money. And it's like, whoa, what are you talking about? Like, everybody loves you, everybody supports you, you're going to freaking kick ass, but it's amazing. Our minds do get on us, and we do have worries and concerns, and as of right now, he looks like he's doing okay, but we'll keep an eye on that. So as for technique, we want to go ahead and try to refine that as more as we can. So he has so much of it right, great, but there was one thing that I saw that might be a good thing to focus on for him, and I said it's going to be more important when we're at maximal weight loads. And what that was it was shoulder rotation when he's pushing upward. So on his way up from the bottom, you could see his elbows rotate back, which then caused his shoulders to rotate forward. What this does is destabilizes that thoracic spine, and it adds basically a flexion point in the middle of the spine between the bar and his hip. That is going to cause your chest to cave forward. It's going to cause your upper body to kind of like bend over. So it's like you're going to bend like a question mark when we would like you to be stiff and rigid from the bar to the hip. So seeing his elbows rotate back, and that it caused a forward rotation of the shoulder, meant that that's definitely something we're going to look to address. Now, every once in a while, you will see somebody's elbows lift up when they squat upward, and that could be partly, if they're a very small body frame, they're trying to create a shelf, like a low bar shelf using their rear delts. So they're going to elevate their elbows like up to try to really secure that shelf as they drive back into the bar, and that's okay. As long as you don't see shoulder rotation or like an extension or like an opening up of the thoracic spine, then it's not really that big of an issue at all. Like it's nothing you need to worry about. But for him, this client, I could see that forward shoulder rotation, and that it was going to cause a loss of stabilization, a loss of tightness in his thoracic spine. So this is something we absolutely want to pay attention to, because when he gets up to his top end weights, when he hits his sticking point, it'll be right when those elbows rotate up, the shoulders would rotate forward. All of a sudden, that area right underneath the bar at the bottom of his shoulder blades is going to become exposed. And if he hits that grinding spot, that sticking spot, bam, his chest is going to rotate forward. He's going to be bent like a question mark, and he's going to stall out. So this is something we definitely want to pay attention to. So I wrote, like a big long description that I'm skipping because it's too much information, I got to the point here. It says, as a way to address this, we can think of countering that movement. So I actually want him to think of rotating his elbows forward as he squats upward. So this is something where when you train people in person or when you work with somebody for a long time online, you can work around the countering behaviors that somebody would do that might not be good. So, for example, if you tell someone to rotate through their thoracic spine by rotating their elbows, I want him to tuck his elbows in and rotate them forward, and that's going to lift his rib cage. That's going to lift and tighten his thoracic spine. If somebody doesn't understand how to do that, they don't practice it correctly, they'll end up contracting their lower back. They're just going to squeeze their lower back and try to shove their whole chest cavity back into the bar. I don't want him to contract his lower back. I want him to contract his mid back. So we need the elbows to pinch inward and rotate forward, and that's going to shove his rib cage forward, and that's going to lock that thoracic spine in. So nothing about the lumbar spine will change. We don't want his lower back, his core, his obliques, nothing about that to change. We want that rotation to be right around the shoulder blade area, that thoracic spine area. So there are exercises we can do called spinal erector deadlifts, which we do with barbells or dumbbells, and that's a great way to kind of figure out what the hell that feels like. Also, seal rows are a great way to work on thoracic tightening and positioning without the lower back getting involved. So there's a lot of other things, but those are like two good examples that you can try if you want to. But that is what I want him to focus on, is his body is going to try to rotate the elbows back. So if we pinch in and rotate forward, we're going to be thinking in our mind that we're gaining position in the opposite direction. But what's probably going to happen is just that nothing moves. So where the body would want to open and expose, we're wanting the countering movement of contracting and tightening. If we do it all correctly, nothing looks like it moves. And that's actually what we want. So I want him to have the mindset of not trying to hold the position, but trying to actually gain advantage on that position, because that will actually allow him to hold it. So again, we're talking about trying to counter the weight of the squat. We're talking about stuff that's well over his body weight, way over his body weight. I train clients who can squat, much more than 2 times their body weight, and that's exceptional. It's amazing. But if you just try to hold against that, you're going to slowly fall apart. You actually have to try to counter it by contracting the muscles harder and harder and harder, like you're trying to kind of flex deeper and harder than what the muscle actually is able to. The harder you flex into the contraction, rather than trying to hold an isometric, it actually allows you to hold that position even better. So that's what I want him to focus on, is I want him to think of pulling his elbows in, rotating the elbows forward. Another cue that pairs well with that is to tuck the chin. So something else you can see when somebody's elbows rotate back and that opens the thoracic spine, their chin usually juts out in front of them. So it's almost like you're extending your head, your chin out and forward. Now, you might be kind of looking up, so you think your head is pulled back, but it's not. You're just bending your neck. But your chin is out away from the body. That is going to promote or be part of that forward shoulder rotation. So not only do I want him to tuck his elbows in and rotate forward, I want him to tuck his chin in as well. So literally like somebody's like pushing on your chin and they're trying to push your head back. Not your forehead, your chin. So you can do this is just think of making the most double chin you could ever make. So the sexiest look. Try to make just a ridiculous, crazy double chin. You'll notice that tucks your chin back. That's going to, what makes it feel like your neck kind of straightens out and stiffens. And you'll notice that often lifts your chest as well. So we want the elbows to tuck in and rotate forward. At the same time, he's going to tuck his chin. When you combine these cues, it counters forward rotation of the shoulders, and it makes sure they stay locked in place so the thoracic spine will hold, and that way he gets maximal kind of stabilization in the lift. Now, why his thoracic spine is starting to open is weakness in the upper hamstrings and glutes. The body wants to try to tuck the hips under the bar on the way up, so it wants to bend through the thoracic spine to allow the hips to come forward under the bar. That's going to cause a loss of power in his leg drive, and that's going to cause him to stall out and fall back down to the bottom. So if we keep the thoracic spine braced and tight, that's going to maintain the stress stimulus into the upper hamstrings and glutes, and that's going to allow that area to grow in strength, and then over time he'll get less and less of the body trying to create this bent thoracic spine positioning. So this is what I want him to think of. This is what I wrote in his notes, is when he's coming out of the bottom of the squat to tuck the chin. Drive your chin back into your neck like you're trying to make a double chin. And then rotate the elbows forward. So think of pinching the elbows in and then rotate them forward underneath the bar. I told him to practice those cues in his warm-up sets and do them as best as he can in his working sets. It may feel frustrating at heavier weights because you might not be able to feel like you're actually able to do it. But the more we practice it, the more he sends videos, the more I can help him with the critique of it. So this is typically how we do technique feedback with my online clients. So I've helped online clients reach, elite totals in powerlifting. I've helped online clients get pro cards in aesthetic sports. So we can definitely do very successful stuff in online coaching. It just takes these videos, it takes communication. And that's what I love the benefit of the online journal we have. My clients can text me if they need to. We can set up some, virtual consultations and things like that for 5 minutes, 10 minutes if they want to. There's always availability. But talking through these cues, talking through positional differences and aspects is super duper helpful. So then I watched the second video he sent, and this was actually at the end of the workout. So the first video he sent was the first working set. The second video he sent was the last working set. Perfect. And in the last working set, you could see all of the other technique aspects stayed right in place, but there was even more exposure of that thoracic opening with the elbow rotation backward. So you could see that as he got tired, that was going to start to getting exaggerated more and more, which then means as we would go up in weight load, that would get exaggerated more and more, even if we were only doing singles like at a powerlifting meet. So that was our squat feedback. Now, I realize at this point that this is already a long podcast, but for the bench stuff, basically, same thing. He sent me bench videos, and there are more missing in this technique than with squats. So this is some of the things I talked to him. I said I want you to focus after the unrack. Be sure you start to lower before you start to lower the bar, take a big breath into your chest and hold it throughout the rep. If you're doing multiple reps, hold a lockout long enough between the reps to get another breath in between the reps. But he needed to have his breath locked in. He didn't breathe in before he started the lift, and that causes loss of internal pressure in his kind of rib cage area, thoracic area, which is what his lats, his shoulders, his chest, the shoulder girdle itself, it's all anchored off of that kind of midsection. So the more we get big air in and brace and hold that air, you have more of a rock solid stabilization base for your back muscles and your shoulder muscles to be supported and to be moving like anchored off of. So we definitely want to get a big breath in before you start to lower the bar. Sometimes people will try to breathe as they're lowering the bar. Too late, don't do that. Try to get the full breath in before you start to lower the bar. Then I told him it looks like at the bottom of the rep, and it's starting to happen just at the very end of the descent. Like when he's about an inch or two off his chest, he kind of loses the squeeze in his mid-back. So he lets the bar kind of like set on him and sink into him, and he actually opens his mid-back to let the bar sink in. He then tries to contract through the back at the same time he's trying to drive the bar off his chest, and that's going to, in his mind, create explosion off the chest. The downside is that destabilizes the base that you're trying to find that explosive power from. You're destabilizing where that explosion has to come from. So it's like if I'm trying to jump explosively off of sand. I'm not going to go very well. So if as I go down in the bench press, I lose my back tightness and I let my shoulder blades actually open, it's like I created sand. And now my body has to be explosive through that. It's not going to go well. The other aspect is you can tear your pec. Big no-no. Definitely not going to like that. Is if your pec contracts before the mid-back squeeze gets in place, you have a high degree of chance of tearing your pec, at least partially. So you're not going to probably detach it, but that is possible. But you're going to get an intramuscular kind of tear right at the connective tissue, and that's going to suck because that's going to make you weaker, and it does have a visual effect on the muscle, which people aren't going to like if you are lean and you do want your muscles to look kind of nice and full. That would be a kind of a thing that people could see. You would see it as a change in the way the muscle is structured. Then also, it's a trade-off. By him trying to loosen his back and explode through mid-back tightness and drive off his chest, he does lose that stabilization, which then makes his lockout trash. His lockout is not going to be very strong. Because of that type of loss of positioning at the bottom. He might regain some of it, but he might not regain all of it. So therefore, at top end strength, his 1 rep max, he's not going to make that lockout. So he'll get an explosion off the chest, probably get to about midway, maybe 3/5 of the way up, and then bam, he'll hit a wall, a sticking point, and then he's not going to be able to finish that lockout. And that's going to be from the loss of mid-back positioning he experienced at the bottom of the rep. So those were the cues I gave him for the next workout, was to have a big breath before you start the descent. Get a big breath in and hold your breath. Then I wanted him to squeeze his mid-back throughout the lift, and I want him to focus on squeezing the mid-back harder than he thinks of anything else. I actually want him to think of a bench press as a mid-back squeeze exercise, and the bar just happens to be moving. So squeeze the hell out of your mid-back. I even told him that it's going to feel like when you stand up that somebody punched you in the back, and that's okay. So that's going to actually indicate that you had a really freaking solid isometric squeeze in those muscles, and that's going to help you stay nice and stable. So that was what I told him to do, and we could see that again in the second video at the end of the workout. You could see that loosening of the positioning and that the big breath and the mid-back tightness is going to make a big effect for him. Now, I have another client that I looked at the deadlift video. It's a conventional deadlift, and they had really good overall technique, but there were some things we could work on. So I wrote back to them, thank you for the video, great intensity, love the purposefulness that you train with. Excellent. And that's going to help you get very far in physical development. So when he lifted, you could tell that he was all into it. Like, a bomb could have went off in the corner of the gym, and he'd have been wouldn't have noticed, or he would have done the deadlift and then went, what was that? But super focused. I loved it. It was great to see that. He had really good tightness, very good control of the weight. He didn't bounce between his reps. He was very consistent with his technique because he was doing multiple reps here. It was awesome. It was great intensity, great overall technique, awesome work. You could tell he's put in a lot of work to developing his technique, and it paid off. Looks awesome. So then I said a couple of things that we can work on to try to help would be is in your setup, And we can do this in his setup that'll better help his strength through the mid-range of the deadlift, which will help with his lockout. So his head was up and his chin was out. Just like we talked about in the squat, that can happen with people in the squat. So his head was up and his chin was out. That's going to cause him to shift more into his toes when the bar leaves the ground. And that's going to cause him, the bar, when it goes past his knees, he'll notice his legs aren't fully locked. His knees are going to be soft yet. They're not going to be fully locked. That's going to cause him to use a lot of lower back to try to drive his hips forward to meet the bar. So it's causing the deadlift to look more of a pull using hip extension rather than a push using leg muscles. You will be much stronger if you think of pushing the deadlift off the floor rather than pulling the deadlift up off the floor. By his chin being out, it was causing him to not best utilize his hamstrings and his glutes. He was using a lot of quads and lower back. Now that might feel stronger for people because those are typically muscles that are initially stronger, but it's going to have a maximal weight load capacity much lower than if we got that chin tucked. So that's what I recommended to him, was to have your chin down. So keep your head in line with your spine. So if your torso is angled forward at, say, 60 degrees, your head should be following that same line. The neck should be in line with your torso. If your torso is angled forward 60 degrees, but your chin is up and your head is up as if you were standing, that's going to cause that forward chin positioning. You will see every now and then, especially in sumo, where people will have their eye line kind of like consistent, like horizontal with the floor, but their torso's damn near totally upright. So think of some people like Bryce Lewis is like that. Yuri Belkin, I think is his last name. He's like that. Dan Green was like that. So if people have a very upright torso, their eye line is going to be kind of horizontal with the floor. But if you look at all those examples, their heads are pulled back. Like they're making some serious double chins. Their neck, it looks like somebody bopped them in the face and their head went slammed back as far as it possibly could. So they're doing this concept as well. They just have an uprighted torso. So if you're doing conventional deadlift, you will not have an upright torso unless you have 17-foot long arms. So you're going to have a very angled forward torso, but your head should stay in line with your spine. So if my torso is angled at 60 degrees, I'm going to look like I'm looking at the floor, maybe 3, 4, 5 feet out in front of me, if I keep my head in line with my spine. Totally fine. Nothing wrong with that. Keep doing it. Then think of shoving your chin back to create the hardest double chin you can think of. And this is especially true if you have a long torso, which this client does have. So the longer the torso, if your head and chin are out, man, you have more stuff hanging out over the front of that bar, and it's going to be rough. So the average human head, I think, weighs around like 5 kilograms, like 11 pounds. So you think about putting a 10-pound weight out in front of, like, hang a 10-pound weight off your head, and then try to deadlift. That's going to be annoying as hell. But your head itself is a 10-pound weight. So we got to get that noggin, back over the barbell. So that's going to help him a lot. So I recommended that he keep his chin down, okay, his neck in line with his spine, and then you think of creating a double chin, and especially since he does have that long torso. That'll pull his armpits and his head more over top of the bar rather than out in front of the bar. That'll shift his weight back more into the mid-foot. So he's going to have equal pressure in his heels and his kind of the balls of his feet. And that's going to better engage his hamstrings all the way from the start of the movement, so it'll feel like more of a push through the legs. His chest won't get as far out over the bar, and that'll decrease the stress he feels in his lower back by having to almost pull the bar back to him rather than having the bar and his body maintain close, like the bar and his hips maintain close proximity, so that way they don't feel like it's a hinge point as much. So that's the main technique I have for him, was if his chin is out, tuck that thing back. So whether you do sumo, whether you can do conventional, whether you have an upright torso, whether you have a 45-degree angle torso, just keep your neck in line with your spine and shove your chin back. That's going to help a lot to better engage your hips and maintain a push mechanics of the deadlift rather than a pull mechanics of the deadlift. Cool. Then I sent him a video on YouTube I wanted him to look at who had a lifter who had a similar body type, and I wanted him to see how that person's set up. So that was cool to send to him as well. But these are things that we go through when I look at videos from clients and how we can kind of work on technique even through kind of remote coaching, like online coaching. I love this stuff. I think it's super exciting. I watch God knows how many videos a week. I've trained people in person. That 10,000 hour rule has been long past. So I love this stuff. I do it all the time. It's fun to kind of break things down, see mechanics. I really do enjoy it. So this is some stuff that you can look for when you watch your own videos. So I do suggest filming yourself. You can kind of look and see how you're moving and see if you can find technical flaws and things you can focus on. So hopefully today's podcast gave you some ideas. I like some of these more nuanced kind of detail things. So hopefully this was interesting for some people. If it is, let me know and I'll make more like this. If it's not, let me know and I'll make less like this. But I appreciate any feedback. Just that way I can always make sure the podcast is serving you well and giving you what you need. Cool. Well, if you like today's podcast, the podcast in general, please consider sharing the podcast. You can do so on social media. It's a great way to share with the most people. You can also just share this conversation with a friend. The idea of sharing it is, if this podcast helps your life, we would like it to reach more people so we can help their lives as well. So thank you if you do share it. I truly appreciate it. Thank you to the patrons of the podcast, people who financially support the podcast. The podcast is well over $1,000 a year for hosting costs. Give an hour to it every day. I would love to keep it for free and keep doing it every day. And it's only thanks to the support, the financial support, that we're able to have that make any sense whatsoever. So thank you very much. I truly appreciate it. You can donate on our website at www.brutalirongym.com. There's an option for a one-time donation, monthly donation, yearly donation. If you donate at all, I truly appreciate it, and thank you very much. If you like the information we share in our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. If you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, anything that you want to know, let us know at our email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.